Welcome to our deep dive. We're going to be looking at the legal side of the music industry today. For all of us who love music, it's pretty fascinating to peek behind the curtain and see how these legal frameworks actually shape how music is made, shared, and ultimately how we all enjoy it. And, I got to say, going through all these sources, the study guides, the FAQs, the articles you gave, I was surprised by some of the stuff I found. Like one of the articles talked about how a musician's image, their likeness, like their signature style or just their look, is considered a valuable asset. And it really got me thinking about those, big endorsement deals we see artists getting these days. Clearly a lot more to this world than meets the eye.
Right. I mean, there really is. And it's important stuff, too.
Yeah, so let's dive in.
Okay, so one thing that I found super interesting was the whole idea of copyright protection. It's really the foundation of music law,
Right.
Like the cornerstone protecting all that creative work.
Yeah, and I noticed the source material really hammered home.
Yeah.
The copyright isn't just stopping someone from
Yeah.
straight up stealing a song.
Right.
It gives artists way more control over how their music gets used.
Exactly. That's what it's all about, making sure they get credit and, get paid for their creativity. I mean, imagine your song ends up in a movie soundtrack or video game, right? Copyright lets the artist negotiate how that happens, make sure they get a fair deal for it.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. It's like a legal safety net for their hard work.
Absolutely. And the materials actually break down how all those rights work, like in streaming or commercials, all sorts of stuff.
Speaking of the nitty-gritty, what about those recording contracts? Those things can be beasts, right? I mean, from what you send over, sounds like there are a lot of traps artists can fall into. Are there certain, red flags in those contracts that lawyers look out for?
Oh, yeah, tons. One of the study guides actually lays out some of the big ones, like ownership of those master recordings, huge deal, making sure the artist keeps some control over their work.
Makes sense. And what about royalties? The sources mentioned those calculations can get pretty hairy.
Oh, for sure they can. That's where you need a lawyer who really gets those ins and outs. They'll be looking for clauses that might cheat the artist, especially now with all this streaming stuff.
Right, because the money's coming from different places now than just record sales.
Exactly.
Sounds like it's not just the big stuff either. It's all those tiny little details buried in the contract.
You got it. I read about a case where this artist signed away the right to their name and likeness even after the contract ended. Just goes to show you need someone to really scrutinize every word of those agreements.
Whoa, that's scary. Makes you realize how much power is in those contracts.
It's like legal chess, Entertainment lawyers got to be thinking 10 steps ahead to protect their clients.
So we've got the music protected, the contract sorted out. What happens when the song starts making money? I'm guessing royalties and revenue sharing, that's where it gets really complicated.
Oh, it's a system, all right. But the point is to make sure everyone who helped create the music gets their share, right? Artists, songwriters, producers, sometimes even session musicians.
Yeah, one of the sources had this great analogy, making sure everyone gets their piece of the pie. But with streaming, downloads, and physical sales all happening, those slices must be getting pretty thin these days.
Oh, they can be. That's why those royalty agreements are so important. They lay out exactly how the money flows, from the streaming service all the way to the artist's pocket.
So those agreements are like the financial roadmap of the whole industry, huh? You'd almost have to be part accountant, part lawyer to figure them out.
Huh. Almost. But seriously, they got to be able to decode those royalty statements, make sure the artist's getting paid what they're owed. Because like you said, streaming has its own whole royalty structure, totally different from traditional record sales.
Right. With the way we listen to music changing so fast, I bet those agreements are constantly changing too.
Absolutely. Entertainment law is always on its toes, adapting to all the new tech and ways of doing business.
Now, we've all had that moment where we hear a song in a movie or a video game, and it just sticks with you. That's where music licensing comes in, right?
Exactly. It's how artists get their music featured and all that stuff. Huge part of the industry.
Seems like a win-win. The artist gets more exposure. The movie gets a great soundtrack. Everybody's happy. But I bet the legal side's a whole other story.
Oh, you bet. So many things to think about. How it's being used, for how long, even where in the world it's being played.
So entertainment lawyers are basically negotiators, making sure the artists get their fair cut.
More than that, they're dealing with all these different types of licenses, like for syncing music with visuals in a film, that's different. Then you got your master use licenses, performance licenses, mechanical licenses. It's a whole world.
Wow, it's like its own legal language.
It kind of is. That's why you need an entertainment lawyer who speaks it fluently, They got to make sure the artist's rights are protected, that they're getting paid properly.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting to me. This whole idea of a musician's image and likeness. having value. You sent me that article about it, remember?
Oh, yeah, it's fascinating stuff. People think about the music, but an artist's name, their photo, even their style, it can all be worth a lot.
Right, like for merch, endorsements, those branding deals we were talking about, it's like there's a whole other career beyond just making the music itself.
There is, and they got to know how to protect that. There was this case, a musician's signature dance move was used in a video game without their permission.
No way. So it goes way beyond just their name or a photo.
Oh, yeah. It's about protecting their whole brand, their identity. Entertainment lawyers are making sure those rights are respected, that artists can actually benefit from who they are. They help set up deals so artists have control over how their image is used, whether it's a regular ad or some crazy VR thing.
So they're like brand strategists too, huh?
You could say that. That's what makes this field so cool, always something new.
We've painted a pretty rosy picture here. Contracts, royalties, deals. But let's be real, the music industry isn't all sunshine and rainbows. Things get messy sometimes, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. You get disputes in any industry, and music's no exception. And when there's big money involved, things can get pretty heated.
Like what kind of conflicts? The sources mention royalty disputes, but what else?
Oh, you name it, from little disagreements to all-out legal wars. You get copyright infringement cases where someone claims a song stole parts of their work.
Makes sense. What about those contracts? Seems like with how complex they are, there must be a lot of breaches.
Oh yeah, all the time. Missed royalty payments, fights over ownership of master recordings, even personality clashes.
So how do they actually settle these disputes? Is it all like lawyers in courtrooms banging their fists on tables?
Sometimes. But entertainment lawyers have a whole toolkit. It's not always about going to war. Like one study guide talks about mediation, where a neutral person helps everyone come to an agreement.
So cooler heads can prevail sometimes.
Exactly. A good lawyer will try every option to find the best solution, something that works for everyone and doesn't cost a fortune.
Yeah, because I'm sure nobody wants to end up in some long, drawn-out court battle if they can avoid it.
Exactly. That's where good negotiating skills come in, finding that common ground, coming up with creative solutions.
Now let's talk about hitting the road. Touring and performance agreements. Got to be a ton of legal stuff involved with getting a band on stage.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other world. People don't always think about it. You got contracts with venues, promoters, sponsors, travel, insurance.
Wow, it's like a whole operation.
It is. Entertainment lawyers are making sure the show goes on smoothly, reviewing contracts, negotiating fees, dealing with liability, all behind the scenes.
I bet those agreements cover things like what happens if a show gets canceled or if a band member gets sick, right?
Absolutely. Got a plan for everything. One article even talked about having clear rules for dealing with, crazy fans and security issues at concerts.
It's like they're risk management experts, too.
Pretty much. The touring world is full of potential disasters. Got to be ready for anything.
Okay, let's switch gears for a minute. Publishing rights. I feel like this is where people get really confused.
You're right. A lot of folks think songwriting is just about performing a song. But it's also about who owns the actual composition, the lyrics, the melody, the whole blueprint.
So it's not just singing it, it's who owns the rights to the song itself.
Exactly, and that's where publishing rights come in, protecting the people who created the music.
Can you give me an example? Like, how does this work in real life?
Say a songwriter writes a hit song, right? They might sign a publishing agreement with a music publisher who helps them manage those rights, collect royalties, promote the song.
So the songwriter keeps making music, and the publisher handles all the business side.
Exactly. And entertainment lawyers make sure those publishing agreements are fair, that songwriters are getting what they deserve. One of the study guides actually breaks down all the different types of royalties songwriters get. It's pretty interesting.
So they're like financial advisors for songs.
Kind of. But yeah, publishing rights are valuable. You got to have a legal team that knows how to protect them.
All right, we've covered a lot, but we got to talk about the big one. Digital rights and streaming. That's where the music industry has really been turned on its head, right?
Absolutely. The digital revolution changed everything. How music's made, shared, listened to, and it totally shook up the legal world too.
Yeah, I bet. We've all heard stories about artists barely getting paid for streams. What are some of the legal hurdles that came with this digital age?
Well, a big one is making sure artists are getting fair pay for their streams. Those royalty rates from streaming platforms have been a huge issue for years.
I remember reading an article about how some artists are getting fractions of a penny per stream It hardly seems fair with how popular streaming is.
It's complicated. There's so much music being streamed, all these different subscription models, the deals between platforms and labels.
So it's not as simple as more streams equals more money for the artist.
Not at all. That's where entertainment lawyers come in. They're trying to get better deals for their clients, fighting for changes in how streaming royalties work.
Sounds like they're up against these huge tech companies. Tough fight.
It can be, but it's where legal expertise is essential. One of the study guides talked about these groups like ACECAP and BMI. They collect and distribute royalties for artists in this digital age.
Oh, right. So there's strength in numbers banding together to get better deals.
Exactly. It's all about using their collective power to make sure artists get paid fairly in this crazy, ever-changing digital world.
Okay, so we've talked about lawyers protecting artists' money, but what about their artistic vision? Does entertainment law have a say in that too?
Absolutely. And that brings us to this really cool concept called moral rights. We'll dive into that in part 2 of our deep dive. It's all about recognizing that a song, a painting, any art, it's more than just a product. It's a part of the artist.
Whoa, okay, this is getting really interesting. So entertainment law isn't just about contracts and dollars. It's about protecting what it means to be an artist.
You got it. And we'll get into all those details when we come back.
All right, we're back and ready to keep digging into entertainment law. Before the break, we were just starting to touch on moral rights in music. And I gotta say, this is a whole new concept for me. Pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it really gets to the core of how an artist feels about their work, you know? It acknowledges that a song or a painting, any creative thing, it's more than just some object someone owns. It's a part of the artist, their personality, their vision.
So it's like protecting the heart and soul of the art, not just the legal ownership.
Exactly. Copyright is all about who profits from the work, the money side of things. Moral rights are about the artist's reputation, their artistic vision, making sure those are protected.
Okay, so can you give me like a real-world example of how moral rights might come up in music?
Sure, imagine a record label buys the rights to a song, right? But then they decide to completely remix it, turn some heartfelt ballad into a crazy dance track. The artist might feel like that totally messes with their original idea, makes them look bad. In some places, they could actually sue the label for violating their moral rights.
Wow, so even if the label owns the copyright, they can't just go wild and do whatever they want with the music.
Nope, moral rights add another layer of protection, goes beyond just the money stuff. In a lot of countries, those rights are like untouchable. The artist can't give them up even if they sell the copyright.
One of the study guides mentioned something called the right of attribution. What's that all about?
Basically, it means the artist always has to be credited as the creator, no matter what. Even if their song's in a movie or someone samples it in their own track, the original artist has to be recognized.
That makes sense. Got to give credit where credit is due, right?
Right. It's about respecting their connection to the work, even if someone else owns the copyright.
So, if I'm getting this right, moral rights are kind of like a shield, preventing someone from taking an artist's work and twisting it into something they never intended.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's about stopping changes that might hurt the artist's reputation or misrepresent what they were trying to say with their art.
This is all super interesting, but how does this actually work in the real world? Are these moral rights like a universal thing?
It depends. Every country's different. Some places have strong moral rights laws, others not so much. It's complicated, which is why it's so important for musicians to have a lawyer who really gets it.
So a good entertainment lawyer is kind of like a guardian angel for an artist's creativity.
Haha, I like that. They're there to understand the law, but also to fight for the artist, both their wallet and their artistic vision.
So far, we've been talking about how entertainment law protects individual artists. But does it have an impact on the whole music industry?
Definitely. Think of it like entertainment law is the framework, the structure that holds the whole music world together.
Okay, like the rules of the game everyone has to follow.
Exactly. It sets up how everything works, from contracts and copyright to licensing and how those royalties get paid out. It creates some stability, predictability, so the whole industry can actually function.
And just like any set of rules, there are always debates about how to interpret them, how they should be applied.
Oh, for sure. Entertainment law is not static. It's always changing, adapting to new technologies, new business models, even changing social norms.
Makes sense. I mean, the music industry has gone through so many transformations, from vinyl records to streaming, and who knows what's next.
Yeah, and one area where things are really evolving is data privacy.
Oh, right. With all these personalized playlists and algorithms, streaming services must be collecting tons of data about our listening habits.
Tons. And that brings up all sorts of legal questions. Who owns that data? How can they use it? What rights do we have as listeners to control our own information?
So it's not just about those traditional copyright and contract issues anymore.
Nope. Entertainment law's got to keep up with technology, data privacy, even consumer protection now.
Seems like entertainment lawyers are going to need to be tech experts on top of everything else.
They do. It's challenging, but exciting, too, being right there on the cutting edge of how the law works in the digital age.
As we've been talking, it struck me that entertainment law is really about balance. It's about finding that sweet spot between the rights of artists and the needs of businesses, protecting creativity, but also making room for new ideas and innovation.
You hit the nail on the head. It's creating a space where creativity can thrive, but everyone gets treated fairly and their rights are respected.
One of the study guides talked about fair use in copyright law. Can you explain that and how it relates to this idea of balance?
Sure. Fair use is this legal idea that lets you use copyrighted stuff in certain situations, even without permission from the owner. It recognizes that sometimes it's good for everyone if copyrighted stuff can be used for the public good, even if the creator didn't say yes.
Like what kind of situations?
Think about a music critic writing a review for an album. They might include little snippets of the songs to make their point. Or a teacher using a song in class to teach about a specific musical style. That's fair use, because it's using the music for a limited and specific reason, and it's not hurting the artist's sales or anything.
So it's about finding that balance, protecting the artists, but also letting ideas and information flow freely.
Exactly. Fair use is super important because it keeps copyright from being too strict and stifling creativity.
It sounds like entertainment law is constantly walking this tightrope, protecting artists' rights, but also making sure music is accessible to everyone.
It is, and that's what makes it so interesting and challenging.
What about the future of entertainment law? What are some of the big things on the horizon, things musicians should be aware of? We talked about data privacy, but what else is coming down the pipeline?
Well, one thing that's getting bigger all the time is blockchain technology. And these things called NFTs, non-fungible tokens, they're starting to make waves in music.
Oh yeah, I've heard of NFTs, but I'm still not totally clear on what they are or how they work.
It's complicated stuff, but basically an NFT is like a digital certificate of ownership for something unique. It could be a piece of art, a video, even a song.
So an artist could create an NFT of their song and sell it directly to fans, cut out the record label entirely.
That's the idea. Gives artists way more control, potentially opens up new ways to make money.
That's pretty wild. But I bet there are a ton of legal questions with all of that.
I bet. Copyright, licensing, how these NFTs fit into the existing legal system. It's a whole new frontier.
Sounds like entertainment lawyers are going to have to become blockchain experts too.
Pretty much. It's moving fast, and it's going to have a huge impact on the music world in the coming years.
It's amazing how much the music industry has changed over the years, from vinyl to streaming. Who knows what's next? What kind of impact have all these technological shifts had on entertainment law?
Huge. Every new technology throws new legal curveballs. The law has to adapt and figure things out.
Like, can you give me an example?
Sure, think back to those file-sharing sites like Napster back in the day. They totally turned the music industry upside down. Everyone was sharing music online. It led to massive copyright problems. Record labels and lawmakers had to completely rethink how to protect music and how to share it legally online.
Yeah, I remember that. Lots of lawsuits, debates about balancing the rights of artists with people's freedom to share music.
Exactly. It was a wild time legally, and it showed how important it is to have strong laws in place that can keep up with all this crazy technology.
So it seems like with every new wave of tech, the law has to play catch-up, figure out how the old rules apply to these new situations.
That's exactly it. That's why entertainment law is always changing, always evolving.
So you're saying even with all this technology, the basics of entertainment law, those are still important.
Totally. Copyright, contracts, licensing, those are still the foundation. But how we apply those concepts, that's always changing to keep pace with the digital world.
Like the rules of the game stay the same, but the playing field is constantly changing.
Yeah, good analogy. And that's why it's so important for everyone involved in music, artists, industry folks, even fans, to have at least a basic understanding of entertainment law.
We've been so focused on the legal and business side, but I think it's important to remember the human side of all this. With all the talk about contracts and royalties and digital platforms, do we risk losing sight of what music really is? The passion, the creativity, the connection?
That's a great point, and I think it's something we should definitely discuss in our final segment. It's so important to remember that music is about human expression, and that should always be at the heart of things, even when we're dealing with all these complex legal and business issues.
We're back for the final part of our deep dive into the wild world of entertainment law in the music biz. It's been a fascinating journey, really.
Yeah, it has. We've explored so much, from the foundations of copyright to those digital streaming services, all those complicated contracts, the whole idea of moral rights, even new tech like blockchain. It's a lot.
And, right before the break, we were talking about something I think is really important, and that's the human element of music.
Mhm.
It's easy to get lost in all the legal stuff and the business side of things, but at the end of the day, music's all about people. It's about expressing yourself, connecting with others, sharing emotions.
You're so right. And I think a lot of entertainment lawyers, they get that. They might spend their days dealing with contracts and negotiations, but deep down, they know this field is all about passion and creativity.
So it's not just about protecting profits, it's about protecting the heart and soul of music.
Exactly. A good entertainment lawyer, they know their job is to help artists handle the business side so they can focus on what matters most, creating music, sharing it with the world.
It's like they're a bridge between the artistic world and the sometimes kind of ruthless business world.
That's a great way to put it. They got to be translators, negotiators, advocates, all at the same time.
Yeah.
And their work, it goes way beyond just helping their individual clients. Well, think about the deals they make, the contracts they write, even the legal battles they fight. All of that shapes the whole music industry. It influences how music is made, how it gets out there, how people listen to it, and ultimately how we experience it.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. It's like they're shaping the culture even if most people don't realize it.
Exactly. And it just shows how important it is to have entertainment lawyers who are ethical, who know their stuff, and who are committed to supporting artists and creating a healthy music scene.
One of the FAQs you sent over actually mentioned how important it is to find a lawyer who really understands what you need as an artist.
Yeah, that's huge. It's like any other job. You got specialists within entertainment law. Some focus on certain types of music, others are experts in digital rights or licensing.
You got to shop around a little, find the right fit.
For sure. You need someone you trust, someone who gets what you're trying to do, and who has the experience to guide you through all the craziness.
Sounds like a good entertainment lawyer is like a trusted partner, someone who's with you every step of the way.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Someone who's there to support you, give you advice, and fight for you, both creatively and financially.
We've talked a lot about the current state of things, but I'm curious, what about the future of entertainment law? What are some of the big challenges coming up, and what are the exciting possibilities?
Well, as we've been talking about, one of the biggest things is keeping up with all the tech changes, new platforms popping up, new ways of doing business, new ways of creating and listening to music. The law's got to keep pace.
Sounds like a constant game of catch-up.
Kind of. But it's also super exciting. Entertainment lawyers are right there on the front lines, figuring out how the law applies to all this new stuff.
You sent me that article about AI, artificial intelligence creating music. That seems like a whole Pandora's box of legal questions.
Oh, it totally is. Who owns the rights to a song written by a computer? What does it mean for human musicians? Those are just some of the things entertainment lawyers are going to have to figure out, and fast.
Sounds like the future of entertainment law is going to be a wild ride.
It will be, that's for sure. But it's also a chance to rethink the old ways of doing things, to create a legal system that supports innovation and make sure creativity can thrive in this crazy digital world.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. I feel like I have a way better understanding of how important entertainment law is, how it shapes the music we love. It's not just a bunch of boring legal rules. It's a living, breathing thing that affects every single part of the music world.
I agree, and I hope our listeners out there feel the same way, that they've gained a new appreciation for how complex, how challenging, and how incredibly important this field is.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So to everyone listening, stay curious, keep learning about the legal side of music, and remember, behind every song, every concert, every playlist you love, there's a whole team of legal experts working hard to make it happen.
And hey, maybe you'll be inspired to become one of those experts someday, shaping the future of music yourself.
Now, that's a great thought. But for now, we'll leave you with this. The next time you hear a song that really gets to you, take a second to appreciate not just the artist who made it, but all those people working behind the scenes, all that legal work that went into bringing that music to your ears. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.